When I was 22, my parents said the words that broke my heart. "Leave your house keys. You're not welcome here anymore." I packed my life into garbage bags and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. 6 months later, the mortgage company called me. My parents were losing our house, and they needed my help to save it. The same house they'd kicked me out of was now the one thing that could bring us back together. But what I discovered would shock me more than losing my family ever did. What if your parents had been keeping the biggest secret of all from the very beginning? And what if the worst day of your life was actually part of a plan you never saw coming? I still remember the sound those keys made when they hit the kitchen table. Sharp, cold metal against wood, like tiny hammers breaking something that couldn't be fixed. Mom's hand was shaking as she pushed them toward me. The same keys I'd carried since I was 16. The ones with the little pink heart keychain River bought me for my birthday. The ones that meant home. "Take them," Mom said. Her voice sounded weird, flat and empty. She wouldn't look at my face. I stared at those silver keys sitting there between the salt and pepper shakers. The same table where we'd eaten dinner every night for 22 years. Where I'd done homework and colored pictures and told them about my day. Now it felt like a stranger's kitchen. But Mom? No. Dad's voice cut through the air like a knife. He stood behind her with his arms crossed, tight against his chest. His face looked like stone, cold and hard and nothing like the dad who used to read me bedtime stories. "You heard your mother, Zara. You made your choice. Now live with it." My throat felt thick, like I couldn't breathe right. "This is my home too." "Not anymore," Mom whispered. Her voice cracked just a little, but she didn't take it back. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the old clock ticking on the wall. Tick, 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 like it was counting down the seconds until my life fell apart. "You want to throw away everything? We taught you." Dad's voice got louder. "Fine, but you won't do it under our roof." I looked around the kitchen one more time, at the coffee maker that Dad used every morning, at Mom's collection of little spoons from all the places we'd visited, on family trips, at the pictures on the refrigerator, me at graduation, me at my first job, me smiling like I belonged somewhere. Now I didn't belong anywhere. "Pack your things," Mom said. She was crying now, but trying to hide it. "We'll give you 2 hours. 2 hours. 22 years of life. And they were giving me 2 hours to disappear." I picked up the keys. They felt heavier than they should have. Like they weighed 1,000 pounds instead of a few ounces. "Please don't do this," I said one more time. "I'm still your daughter." Dad's face got even harder. Our daughter wouldn't choose this life. Our daughter would listen to us. "I am listening, but I can't stop being who I am." "Then you can't stay here." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw those keys across the room and make them understand. But looking at their faces, I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided. In their minds, I was already gone. So I went upstairs to my room, the same room I'd slept in since I was a baby. Pink walls that I'd begged to paint purple when I was 12. The bed where I'd had sleepovers and read. Books under the covers with a flashlight. The desk where I'd written my college application essays. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. Like I was looking at someone else's life through a window. I found 2 garbage bags in the hall closet and started stuffing them with clothes. Jeans and sweaters and the dress I wore to church on Sundays. Not that I'd be going to church with them anymore. Not that I'd be going anywhere with them anymore. My hands were shaking as I packed. Every piece of clothing felt like I was throwing away a memory. The blue sweater Mom bought me for Christmas. The t-shirt from our family vacation to the beach. The pajamas I wore when I was sick and Dad brought me soup in bed. I couldn't take much. Just clothes and a few books and the little jewelry box Grandma gave me before she died. Everything else, my furniture, my old stuffed animals, the pictures of friends, had to stay behind. 2 hours felt like 2 minutes. Before I knew it, Dad was standing in my doorway. "Time's up," he said. I carried the garbage bags downstairs. Mom was still in the kitchen, washing dishes that were already clean. She didn't look at me when I walked past. Dad followed me to my car. My beat-up Honda that barely ran but was all I could afford. Now it was going to be my everything. My transportation and my only safe place in the world. "Zara," Dad said as I put the bags in my back seat. For a second, I thought he was going to change his mind. Tell me this was all a mistake. That? They loved me no matter what. Instead, he said, "Don't come back until you're ready to make the right choice." I got in my car and started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see Mom watching from the kitchen window. Her face was wet with tears, but she didn't wave goodbye. Drove away from the blue house with the white shutters. The house where I'd learned to walk and talk and ride a bike. The house where I'd felt safe and loved for 22 years. Now I was homeless. Not because I didn't have money or because something terrible happened to me. I was homeless because I'd told my parents I was in love with a girl named River, and they couldn't handle the truth. As I drove through our neighborhood, past houses full of families who probably weren't falling apart, I realized something that made my chest hurt even worse. They hadn't just taken my home away. They'd made me feel like I didn't deserve to have one. I drove around for an hour before I remembered Kaya, my best friend from high school who lived across town in a tiny apartment above the pizza place. I'd been putting off calling her because, what do you say? "Hi, my parents threw me out for being gay. Can I sleep on your couch?" But when you're sitting in a parking lot with everything you own in garbage bags, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. Kaya opened the door in her pink pajamas with little cats on them. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without asking any questions. "What happened?" she said, wrapping her arms around me. I tried to tell her, but the words got stuck in my throat, so I just stood there in her tiny living room and cried. Big, ugly sobs that made my whole body shake like I was falling apart from the inside out. Kaya held me until I couldn't cry anymore. Then she made hot chocolate and we sat on her couch while I told her everything. About telling my parents, about River, about the look on their faces, about the keys hitting the table. "They'll come around," she said when I finished. "Parents always do." But I wasn't so sure. The way Dad's voice sounded when he said, "Our daughter wouldn't choose this life," kept playing in my head, like he'd already buried the daughter he used to have. That night, I lay on Kaya's couch staring at the ceiling. Everything smelled like pepperoni from the restaurant downstairs. I kept thinking about my own bed, with the soft blue sheets Mom had bought me for graduation, about how Dad always checked to make sure I'd locked the front door before he went to sleep. Now they probably weren't thinking about me at all. Living on Kaya's couch was like being a ghost in someone else's life. I tried to make myself small and quiet. I folded up my blankets every morning and kept my stuff in the corner so it wouldn't get in her way. "You know you can stay as long as you need," Kaya said one morning over coffee. But I could hear something in her voice. A little tired sound that meant she loved me but needed her space back. And I couldn't blame her. Who wants their living room turned into someone else's bedroom? After a week of looking, I found a job at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, the kind of place that smelled like bacon grease and served coffee so strong it could wake the dead. The manager was a big man named Eddie with kind eyes and gray hair. "You ever wait tables before?" he asked, looking at my application. "No, but I learn fast." He studied my face for a moment, like he was trying to figure out my story without asking. "You work hard, you'll do fine here," he said, handing me a uniform that had seen better days. "Start tomorrow at 6. 6 in the morning felt like the middle of the night. But I needed this job. I needed something that was mine. Something I could control when everything else felt like it was spinning out of my hands. The work was harder than I thought it would. My feet hurt all the time from standing on them for 8 hours. My back ached from carrying heavy plates of food. But there was something good about being tired from work instead of tired from crying. Something real about earning money, even if it wasn't very much. After 2 weeks, I had enough saved for a deposit on my own place. I found a tiny studio apartment above Rosie's Bakery on the other side of town. It wasn't much bigger than a closet, but it had a window that looked out over the street and a little bathroom that was all mine. The landlord was an old Chinese woman named Mrs. Chen, who spoke in a mix of English and words I didn't understand. "You pay on time." "We have no problems," she said, counting my first month's rent twice before putting it in her purse. Moving in was easy because I didn't have much to move. A mattress from Goodwill, a folding table from the dollar store, a few dishes Kaya gave me from her kitchen. No pictures on the walls, because I didn't have any that didn't hurt to look at. The apartment was clean and empty and quiet, like a blank page waiting for me to write a news story on it. But at night, when the bakery closed and the street got quiet, the silence felt too big. I'd lie on my mattress looking at the empty walls and wonder what my parents were doing. If they missed me during dinner. If Mom still set out 3 plates before remembering there were only 2 of them now. I started picking up extra shifts at the diner. Working kept my mind busy and my hands moving. It kept me from thinking too much about the life I used to have. Eddie was good to me. He didn't ask questions about why a 22-year-old girl was living alone in a studio apartment and working every shift she could get. He just made sure I ate enough and didn't work so many hours that I made myself sick. "You got people?" he asked one evening while we were cleaning up. "I got me," I said. He nodded like that was enough, but his eyes said he knew it wasn't. The regular customers started to learn my name. Mr. Peterson came in every Tuesday for coffee, and always complained about the weather. Mrs. Martinez brought her 3 kids in after school and let them do homework in the corner booth. Tommy, the construction worker, always left the quarters in the tip jar and called me kiddo like I was his daughter. These people became something like family. Not the deep, complicated love of real family, but the simple kindness of people who saw me every day and cared if I was okay. It wasn't much, but it was something. And after feeling like I deserved nothing, something felt like everything. 1 month after I'd driven away with my life in garbage bags, I stood in my tiny apartment and realized I'd done it. I'd built a life from nothing. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine. For the first time since that terrible day in the kitchen, I felt like maybe I was going to be okay. Maybe I didn't need their permission to deserve a home after all. But knowing something in your head and feeling it in your heart are 2 different things. 3 months into my new life, I started writing letters I knew I'd never send. "Dear Mom, today I learned how to make your meatloaf recipe. Not from you, from a YouTube video. I had to watch it 5 times because I kept crying and couldn't see the screen. It didn't taste the same. Nothing tastes the same without love mixed in. Dear Dad, I saw a man fixing his daughter's bike today. She was maybe 8 years old with pigtails like I used to wear. He was so patient with her, even when she got mad and threw her helmet on the ground. It made me remember when you taught me to ride mine. You ran behind me for 3 whole blocks, even though your back was hurting." I kept the letters in a shoebox under my bed. Page after page of things I wanted to say but couldn't. Words that felt too big for phone calls and too small for the hurt between us. The diner became my real home. Eddie was like a father who didn't ask hard questions. He just made sure I ate lunch and didn't work so many double shifts that I forgot to sleep. "You're a good kid," he told me one day while I was wiping down tables. "Don't let the world make you think different." The regular customers knew my name now. They asked how I was doing and actually waited for an answer. Mrs. Martinez always brought me leftover cookies from her kids' lunchboxes. Mr. Peterson stopped complaining about the weather when I looked sad and started telling me funny stories about his cat instead. Tommy the construction worker became my favorite. He had 3 daughters of his own and worried about me like I was the 4th one. "You eating enough?" he'd ask every morning. "You got heat in that apartment? You need me to look at anything that's broken?" It felt good to have someone worry about me again, even if it wasn't the same as having parents who worried. I started taking a class at the community college, just one at night after work. Business math, because I wanted to understand money better. I wanted to never be scared of bills again. The teacher was a young woman named Ms. Rodriguez, who had the same way of explaining things twice if you didn't get them the first time. She noticed when I did well on tests, when I stayed after to ask questions, when I fell asleep during class because I'd worked a double shift. "You're smart," she told me one evening. "Don't waste it on being afraid." I thought about that a lot, about wasting things, about being afraid. I'd wasted 3 months feeling sorry for myself, 3 months writing letters instead of making phone calls, 3 months being angry when maybe I should have been brave instead. But being brave was scary. What if I called and they hung up on me? What if they'd changed their phone number? What if they'd moved on and forgotten they ever had a daughter? Imna Brzara? The hardest part was holidays. Thanksgiving came and I worked a double shift so I wouldn't have to think about the empty chair at their table. Or maybe they didn't have an empty chair. Maybe they were relieved I wasn't there to ruin their perfect family dinner. Christmas was worse. The diner was closed, so I had nowhere to hide from the quiet. I walked through town looking at houses with lights in the windows. Families gathered around trees, opening presents, being together like it was the easiest thing in the world. I wondered if Mom still hung the ornaments I made in elementary school, little paper angels with my name written in crayon. If Dad still told the story about the year I tried to stay awake to catch Santa and fell asleep under the tree instead. Or maybe they'd thrown all my ornaments away. Maybe they'd erased me from Christmas like they'd erased me from everything else. On New Year's Eve, I wrote the longest letter yet. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know you think I chose something over you, but you were wrong. I chose something and you. I thought families were supposed to be big enough for all kinds of love. I thought we were strong enough for me to be different and still be yours. I miss Sunday dinners. I miss Dad's terrible jokes about the weather. I miss Mom humming while she cooks. I miss being part of something bigger than just me. River makes me happy. She makes me laugh and feel safe and loved. Isn't that what you always wanted for me? Someone who would take care of my heart? I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if you want it fixed. But I'm still your daughter. That doesn't change just because you don't like who I love. I'm doing okay. I have a job and an apartment, and I'm taking classes. I'm becoming the person you raised me to be, strong and independent, and kind. I just wish you could be proud of me for it. Love always, Zara. I held that letter for a week before I put it with the others. Under the bed, in the dark, with all the words I was too scared to say out loud. But something was changing in me. Maybe it was the way Eddie trusted me to handle the morning rush by myself. Maybe it was Ms. Rodriguez believing I was smart enough for college. Maybe it was just time making me stronger. I was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I was brave. Enough to be the first one to try fixing what was broken. The letters helped me practice what I wanted to say. They helped me figure out that I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad. Sad for all of us. Sad for the family we used to be and the family we might never be again. But sadness was better than anger. Sadness meant there was still love underneath. All the hurt. And love, even buried love, was something you could build on. One evening in January, I sat in my tiny apartment looking at the shoebox full of letters, all those words I'd been too afraid to speak. All those feelings I'd been carrying around like stones in my pockets. Maybe it was time to stop writing letters and start making phone calls. Maybe it was time to find out if love really could be bigger than fear. But before I could work up, the courage to call my parents, someone else called me. It was a Tuesday morning in February. I was getting ready for my early shift at the diner when my phone rang with a number I didn't know. I almost didn't answer. People were always trying to sell me things I couldn't afford. But something made me pick up. "Is this Zara Mikhail?" The voice was professional, all business. "Yes," I said, suddenly worried. Nobody called me by my full name except bill collectors. "This is Janet Morrison from First National Mortgage Company. I'm calling about the property at 2047 Maple Street." My blood went cold. That was my parents' address, the house where I grew up, the house I'd been locked out of 6 months ago. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I don't understand. That's not my house." There was a pause. I could hear papers rustling. "According to our records, you're listed as a co-owner on the deed. The mortgage payments are 3 months behind, and we need to discuss your options before we proceed with foreclosure." The phone almost slipped out of my hand. That's impossible. My parents own that house. They've lived there for 20 years. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the deed right here. Zara Mikhail is listed as joint owner with Ahmad and Salma Mikhail. When did you last speak with the other owners?" My legs felt weak. I sat down hard on my little folding chair. 6 months ago. "I see. Well, you need to know that the property is in serious trouble. The bank has sent multiple notices to all owners. If the debt isn't resolved by March 15th, we'll have no choice but to foreclose." After she hung up, I just sat there staring at my phone. Nothing made sense. Why was my name on the deed? Why hadn't my parents been paying the mortgage? And why hadn't they called me? If they were in trouble? I called in sick to work. Eddie wasn't happy, but he could hear something in my voice. "You okay, kid?" he asked. "I will be," I said, hoping it was true. I knew I had to go see them, even if they slammed the door in my face, even if it hurt worse than that day in the kitchen when they threw me out. The drive to Maple Street felt like traveling back in time. Every block brought back memories. The corner where I learned to ride my bike, the park where Dad taught me to throw a baseball. The ice cream shop where Mom took me after school on special days. Their house looked different, smaller somehow. The paint was peeling around the windows. Mom's flower garden was full of weeds. The mailbox was stuffed so full that letters were falling out onto the ground. I picked up the mail without thinking. Bill after bill, past due notices, final warnings, all addressed to people who used to love me. My hands were shaking when I knocked on the door. Mom opened it. For just a second, her face lit up like sunrise, like she'd been waiting for me. Every day for 6 months. Then she remembered she was supposed to be angry, and the light went out. "Zara." Her voice was flat. Careful. "Mom, we need to talk. The mortgage company called me." Her face crumpled. All the anger melted away, leaving just fear and shame. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you found out this way." She let me in. The house felt different. Inside, too. Quieter. Like the life had been sucked out of it. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd told me to leave. But now he looked smaller. Older. His shoulders curved forward like he was carrying something too. "Heavy, Zara," he said, not looking up. "Your mother didn't want you to know." "Know what?" I sat down across from them, in the chair I used to sit in for every meal growing up. "Why is my name on the deed? Why are you behind on payments?" Mom and Dad looked at each other. One of those married people conversations that happen without words. "We put your name on the deed 5 years ago," Mom said finally. "Our lawyer said it would make things easier if something happened to us. We never thought you'd leave," Dad finished. The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and hard to breathe through. "I didn't want to leave," I said. "You made me leave." "We thought," Dad's voice broke a little, "we thought if we were firm enough, you'd change your mind. Come back to us the way we wanted you to be. But you didn't change," Mom said. "And we couldn't change either, so we just stayed. Apart. Hurting." "What about the mortgage?" I asked. Dad rubbed his face with both hands. "I lost my job 4 months ago. Company downsized. At my age, nobody wants to hire an old electrician. We used up our savings trying to keep up with payments. We were too proud to ask for help," Mom added. "Too ashamed. And we didn't think we had the right to call you after what we did." I looked around the kitchen, at the place where I'd eaten thousands of meals, where I'd done homework at this same table, where I'd told them I was in love with someone they couldn't accept. "So what happens now?" I asked. "We lose the house," Dad said simply. "Move in with your Aunt Nadia until we figure something out. Start over at 65 years old." The silence stretched between us. 6 months of hurt and pride and stubborn love that didn't know how to bend. Finally, I spoke. "What if we don't lose it?" They both looked at me like I'd said something crazy. "What if we find a way to save it?" "Zara," Mom said gently, "you can't fix this. It's too much money, too much damage." "Maybe," I said, "but I can try. This house, it's still home. Even after everything, it's still home." Dad started crying then, big, quiet tears that made his whole body shake. "I'm so sorry, Habibti. I'm so sorry for what we did to you." "Habibti, my love." He hadn't called me that since before. And just like that, the wall between us started to crack. The next 3 weeks were like fighting a war, except instead of fighting an enemy, we were fighting time and numbers and banks that didn't care about flower gardens or Sunday dinners or the swing set in the backyard. I moved back home. Not because everything was fixed between us, but because broken. Families can still work together when they have to. Mom made up my old room like I'd never left. She even put fresh sheets on the bed and filled the dresser with clean towels. Dad didn't say much at first, but he started leaving coffee for me in the morning. Made exactly the way I liked it, with too much sugar and a little bit of cream. We were different now, careful with each other, like we were walking on broken glass and trying not to cut our feet. But we were together. The first thing I did was sit down with all their bills. Dad's pride had kept him from showing Mom how bad things really were. Bills stacked on bills, late fees on top of late fees. They owed $18,000 in back payments, plus penalties that kept growing every day. "It's impossible," Mom said, looking at the numbers spread across the kitchen table. "We don't have that kind of money." "Then we'll find it," I said. But even as I said it, I wondered where we'd find $18,000 in 3 weeks. That was more money than I'd ever seen in my whole life. I called Ms. Rodriguez from school, told her what was happening, asked for advice. "Banks don't want to foreclose," she told me. "It costs them money too. They might work with you if you have a solid plan and can show good faith." So I made a plan. I wrote down every penny we could scrape together. My savings from working at the diner, $3,200. Mom's jewelry that she never wore anymore. Maybe $1,500 if we sold it. Dad's collection of tools from 40 years of electrical work, another $2,000 if we were lucky. Still not enough. Not even close. Eddie at the diner let me pick up every extra shift I could handle. I worked doubles every day, then came home and made phone calls. To the bank, begging for an extension. To Dad's old co-workers, asking if anyone knew about jobs. To relatives we hadn't talked to in years. That was the hardest part, calling people and asking for help. Admitting that our perfect family wasn't so perfect after all. "What happened to Ahmad?" Uncle Omar asked when I called him in California. "Last I heard, his business was doing great." "Times got tough," I said, not wanting to explain everything. "We just need a little help to get back on our feet." Uncle Omar sent $300. Aunt Nadia sent $500 with a note that said, "Family helps family, no matter what." My cousin Layla, who I barely knew, sent $200 and a card with a heart on it. Every dollar felt like hope. Every check in the mail felt like maybe we could actually do this. But the hardest conversation was with Kaya. I had to tell her why I'd disappeared from her life, why I'd moved back to the house I'd been thrown out of. "They kicked you out for being gay," she said, her voice flat with anger. "And now you're trying to save their house?" "It's not just their house," I said. "My name is on the deed, and it's still home." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." She was right. I wasn't just fighting to save a building. I was fighting to save the idea that families can break and still be families. That love can be bigger than fear, even when it takes time to grow that big. "I don't expect you to understand," I told her. "I do understand," she said quietly. "I just hope you know what you're doing." With 1 week left before the deadline, we were still $8,000 short. I hadn't slept in 3 days. Mom had stopped eating. Dad kept walking around the house like he was trying to memorize every corner. That's when the miracle happened. Mrs. Chen, my old landlord, called me out of nowhere. "You remember Mrs. Martinez?" "From the diner?" she asked. "The lady with 3 kids who always sits in the corner booth?" "Of course I remember her." "She told her church about your family. They took up a collection. Also, Eddie talked to all the other restaurant owners in town. Said business people got to stick together." 2 hours later, people started showing up at our door. Mrs. Martinez with an envelope full of cash from her church congregation. Mr. Peterson, who complained about the weather every Tuesday, with a check for $500. Tommy, the construction worker, with money from his whole crew. Even customers I barely remembered came by. The old man who always ordered pie for breakfast. The young mother who brought her baby in on Saturdays. People bringing $20 here, $50 there. All of them saying the same thing. Zara's a good kid. She helped us when we needed it. But I couldn't remember helping any of them. All I'd done was bring them coffee and remember how they liked their eggs. "That's enough," Eddie said when I told him. "Sometimes helping people just means showing up every day and caring about them. You did that." By evening, we had enough. Not just enough, we had extra. Enough to catch up on the mortgage and pay the penalties and still have something left over for groceries. Mom cried when we counted the money. "All these people," she kept saying, "all these people who barely know us." "They know Zara," Dad said, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes for months, something that looked like pride. "They know what kind of person she is." The next morning, we walked into First National Bank together, all 3 of us carrying bags of cash and checks and money orders. We must have looked like we were planning to rob the place instead of save it. Janet Morrison, the woman who'd called me, met us in her office. She counted everything twice, then stamped a bunch of papers with red ink. "Congratulations," she said, shaking our hands. "Your home is safe." Outside the bank, we stood on the sidewalk and just breathed. like we'd been holding our breath for a month and could finally let it out. "What now?" I asked. Dad put his arm around me, first time in almost a year. "Now we go home and figure out how to be a family again." It wasn't going to be easy. Saving the house was just the first step. We still had things to work through, things to forgive, things to understand about each other that we'd been too scared or proud to talk about before. Spring came early that year. By April, Mom was back in her garden, planting flowers like she was planting hope. Dad found work with a small electrical company across town. Not as much money as his old job, but enough to pay the bills. And I kept working at the diner while taking night classes, building something that looked like a future. We were healing, but healing isn't a straight line. Some days were good. We'd have dinner together and laugh at Dad's terrible jokes like nothing had ever been broken. Other days were hard. We'd dance around the big questions, the things we still needed to say to each other. The breakthrough came on a Sunday in May. I was helping Mom plant tomatoes when she suddenly stopped digging and looked at me. "Tell me about her," she said. My hands went still in the dirt. "What?" "The girl, the one you love. Tell me about her." I thought about pretending I didn't know what she meant, but we'd spent too much time pretending already. "Her name is River," I said slowly. "She's a teacher at Lincoln Elementary. 3rd grade. She has laugh lines around her eyes even though she's only 26. She volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. She makes the worst coffee in the world, but she tries so hard that I never tell her." Mom kept planting, but I could see her listening. Really listening for the first time. "She sounds nice," she said finally. "She is. She's the kindest person I've ever met." When I told her about what happened with you and Dad, she didn't get angry. She just held me while I cried and said that sometimes people need time to grow big enough for love. Smart girl. We worked in silence for a while. The sun was warm on our backs, and I could hear Dad mowing the lawn in the backyard. Normal family sounds that I'd missed more than I realized. "I'd like to meet her someday," Mom said suddenly. If you think she'd want to meet us." I started crying right there in the dirt. Happy tears this time. The kind that feel like relief after holding your breath too long. That evening, I called River. We'd been talking on the phone every few days since I moved back home, but I hadn't seen her since before the mortgage crisis started. "I want you to come to dinner," said. "Sunday dinner, with my parents." There was a long pause. River knew the whole story. She knew what Sunday dinners meant in my family, how they were sacred, how getting invited meant you were family. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure. Mom asked about you today. She wants to meet you." "And your dad?" I looked through the kitchen window at Dad, who was reading the newspaper in his favorite chair. The same chair where he used to help me with math homework when I was little. Dad's learning. We all are. Sunday came bright and warm. I spent the morning helping Mom cook all my favorite foods from when I was little. Grape leaves stuffed with rice and meat, lamb with pine nuts. Baklava that took 3 hours to make and filled the whole house with the smell of honey and nuts. "You didn't have to make so much," I said, watching her roll grape leaf after grape leaf. "First impressions matter," Mom replied, but she was smiling. River arrived at exactly 5 o'clock, carrying flowers for Mom and a bottle of fancy olive oil for Dad. She wore a simple blue dress and had that nervous smile she got when she was trying really hard to make people like her. "Mr. and Mrs. McHale," she said, shaking their hands carefully. "Thank you so much for having me in your home." Dad looked at her for a long moment. I held my breath, waiting. "Call me Ahmad," he said finally. And thank you for bringing flowers. Salma loves flowers more than anything. Dinner was awkward at first. We all tried too hard to be normal. But then River asked Dad about his work, and he started explaining how electrical systems work in old houses. She listened like it was the most interesting thing in the world, asking questions that made him light up. "You're a teacher?" Mom asked. "Passing River more rice." "Third grade," River said, her face brightening. "I love that age. They're old enough to think deep thoughts, but young enough to still believe in magic." "Zara always loved school," Mom said. "Even as a little girl, she wanted to know everything. Why this? Why that? All day long." "She still does that," River said, smiling at me across the table. "Last week she spent 2 hours researching why some tomatoes are better for sauce than others." "That's my daughter," Dad said, and there was warmth in his voice that I hadn't heard in almost a year. After dinner, River helped Mom with dishes while Dad and I sat on the back porch. The sun was setting over the neighborhood, painting everything, golden and peaceful. "She's good for you," he said quietly. "Yeah, she is. When you were little," he said, "I used to worry about who you'd end up with. I wanted someone who would take care of you, love you the way you deserve to be loved." I waited, not sure where this was going. "I was so worried about the who that I forgot about the how," he continued. "She looks at you the way I look at your mother, like you're the best thing that ever happened to her." "She is good to me, Dad." "I can see that. And you're happy." "I am." He nodded slowly. "Then that's what matters, your happiness." "I'm sorry. It took me so long to understand that." When River was getting ready to leave, Mom hugged her tight. "You come back next Sunday," she said firmly. "I'll teach you to make grape leaves properly. These store-bought ones are terrible." "I'd love that," River said, and I could tell she meant it. After she left, we sat in the living room together, the three of us, quiet and content like we used to be when I was young. "She's family now," Mom said suddenly. "If she makes you happy, she's family." Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. "We lost too much time being afraid. Let's not lose any more." That night, lying in my old room, I thought about all the letters I'd written but never sent. All the words I'd been too scared to say. All the love I'd been afraid wasn't big enough to hold everyone I cared about. But love isn't a house with limited space. It doesn't get smaller when you share it. Love is like Mom's garden. The more you tend it, the more it grows. The more room you make, the more beautiful it becomes. We still had work to do. Conversations to finish, trust to rebuild. But we had something stronger than fear now. We had each other. All of us. Exactly as we were. 1 year later, I was standing in the same kitchen where it all began, but everything was different. The morning light came through windows Mom had hung with new curtains, bright yellow ones that River had helped her pick out at the fabric store. The table where my keys had landed that terrible day was now covered with wedding planning magazines and sample invitations. "What do you think of these?" River asked, holding up 2 different cards. She'd been living with us for 3 months now, officially. But really, she'd been part of our family since that first Sunday dinner when Dad told her to call him Ahmad. "They're both beautiful," Mom said, looking over her shoulder. "But this one matches the flowers better." I watched them together, heads bent over wedding plans, and felt that warm feeling I was still getting used to. The feeling of everything being exactly where it belonged. Dad came in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands. His electrical business had grown enough that he'd hired 2 other guys. Not rich, but stable. Proud of his work again. "The venue called," he announced. "They can do the ceremony in the garden like you wanted. No extra charge." "Really?" River's face lit up like Christmas morning. Even with the rose arch? Especially with the rose arch, Dad said, grinning. I told them my daughter has good taste and they better treat her right. My daughter. He'd been saying that more often lately. About both of us. River was his daughter now too, in all the ways that mattered. The wedding planning had been an adventure. Not because it was complicated, but because it was the first time our two families had tried to blend together. River's parents, who lived in Oregon, were flying in next month. They were nervous about meeting us, just like we'd been nervous about everything else. What if they don't like Middle Eastern food? Mom had worried for weeks. What if they think we're too loud? Dad had added. What if they think we're not good enough for their daughter? I'd said, speaking the fear we were all carrying. But River had just laughed. They're going to love you because I love you. And if they don't, that's their problem, not ours. That's the thing about River that still amazed me. She was strong in quiet ways. She didn't fight problems, she just loved them into being smaller. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Mom answered it on the second ring. Zara, it's for you. Someone from the community college. I took the phone, curious. Hello? Zara? This is Dean Williams. I have some exciting news. Your application for the business program has been accepted, and you've been awarded a partial scholarship. My legs went weak. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. I'd applied months ago, not really believing I had a chance. But Ms. Rodriguez had pushed me to try, helped me write the essay, told me I was smart enough for anything. Are you serious? I asked. Very serious. Your essay about rebuilding after hardship was exceptional. We'd love to have you start in the fall semester. After I hung up, I just sat there staring at the phone like it might ring again and tell me it was all a mistake. What's wrong? River asked, rushing over to me. Nothing's wrong, I said, my voice shaky with disbelief. Everything's right. I got into college. With a scholarship. The kitchen exploded into celebration. Mom started crying and hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. Dad picked me up and spun me around like I was 5 years old again. River kissed me right there in front of my parents, and nobody looked away or got uncomfortable. I'm so proud of you, Mom kept saying through her tears. So proud. That evening, we had an impromptu celebration dinner. Eddie came over, bringing pie from the diner and stories about the new waitress who couldn't remember anyone's order. Kaya drove in from her new apartment across town. She'd finally forgiven me for moving back home, especially after she met River and saw how happy we all were together. Speech, Eddie called out when we were all sitting around the table with coffee and too much dessert. I don't do speeches, I protested, but everyone was looking at me expectantly. Come on, River said, squeezing my hand under the table. Tell us what you're thinking. I looked around the table at all these people who'd become my chosen family. Eddie, who'd given me work when I had nothing and a place to belong when I felt lost. Kaya, who'd given me a couch when I had nowhere to sleep and forgiveness when I needed it most. Mom and Dad, who'd learned that love was bigger than fear and stronger than pride. River, who'd loved me through everything and made me believe I deserved good things. 2 years ago, I said slowly, I thought my life was over. I thought losing my family meant losing everything. But I was wrong. I had to stop for a second because my throat was getting tight with emotion. I didn't lose my family. I just expanded it. Love isn't like a pie where everyone gets smaller pieces. It's like Mom's garden. The more you plant, the more grows. That's beautiful, Habibti, Dad said, and his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. I used to think being kicked out was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But maybe it was the best thing. Maybe I needed to learn who I was when I only had myself. Maybe we all needed to learn that love doesn't work when it comes with conditions. Mom reached across the table and took my hand. We all learned something important. What did you learn? River asked her gently. Mom was quiet for a moment, thinking. I learned that my daughter's happiness is more important than my expectations. I learned that families can look different and still be families. I learned that love grows when you let it. What about you, Ahmad? Eddie asked Dad. Dad cleared his throat and straightened up like he was about to give an important speech. I learned that being right isn't the same as being loving. And I learned that sometimes the people who challenge us the most are the ones who help us grow the most. Deep thoughts from the electrician, Kaya teased, but she was smiling. Hey, Dad said with mock indignation. I contain multitudes. We sat there until late, talking and laughing and planning the future. College and wedding and the electrical. Business and River's promotion to head teacher, and Mom's idea to start selling her vegetables at the farmer's market. Before everyone left, River and I walked out to the garden. The tomatoes were coming in heavy and red, and the roses Dad had planted for the wedding were starting to bloom in pink and white clusters. Are you happy? She asked, the question she always asked when big things happened. I'm happy, I said, without hesitation. Are you? I'm marrying my best friend in 3 months, she said, spinning around with her arms out like she was trying to hug the whole world. In a garden planted by people who love us, with cake made by your mom and flowers, grown by your dad. How could I not be happy? When I was a kid, I said, pulling her close, I used to think happiness was something that happened to you, like luck or good weather. I didn't know it was something you could build. What do you think now? I looked back at the house where the kitchen lights were still on and I could see Mom and Dad cleaning up together, moving around each other like they'd been dancing the same dance for 25 years. Now I think happiness is like a house, I said. You have to build it brick by brick. Some days are good building days. Some days storms knock down what you've built and you have to start over. But if you keep building, if you don't give up, eventually you have something solid. Something that can weather whatever comes. And what do you think is coming? River asked softly. I pulled her closer, breathing in the smell of roses and tomatoes and home and endless possibility. Everything, I said. College and marriage and maybe kids. Someday and getting old together and Sunday dinners for the next 40 years. I think everything good is coming. That night, lying in my old room that was somehow completely new, I thought about the girl who'd sat in her car with 2 garbage bags and a broken heart 2 years ago. She couldn't have imagined this. This house full of love and laughter. This family that had learned to bend without breaking. This future that stretched out bright and wide and full of promise. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to become, who you were supposed to be all along. 6 months after the wedding, I was cleaning out the attic when I found it. A cardboard box shoved way back in the corner, covered in dust and forgotten by time. Mom had asked me to look for Christmas decorations, but instead I found something that would change everything I thought I knew about my story. The box was labeled Important Papers in Dad's careful handwriting. Inside were old documents, birth, certificates, insurance policies, tax returns, normal grown-up stuff that seemed boring until I got to the bottom. There, in a manila envelope marked, For Zara, when she's ready, was a letter in Mom's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. My dearest Zara, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way back home. It means we survived the hardest thing we've ever had to do as parents. There are things you don't know about the day we asked you to leave. Things we've never told you because we were ashamed, because we were cowards, because we thought keeping secrets would hurt less than telling the truth. We knew about River long before you told us. I stopped reading. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. They knew? How could they have known? Mrs. Patterson. From down the street saw you at the park together last summer. She called me, all worried about what people would think. I hung up on her, but the damage was done. Your father started watching you differently after that, looking for signs, asking questions. We both did. And when we saw how happy you were, how you smiled more than you had in years, we knew, and we were terrified, not of who you were becoming, of what other people would say, of what it would mean for our standing in the community. Your father's business depends on people trusting him. Our church friendships go back decades. We built our whole life on being the good family. We spent months fighting about it, behind closed doors after you went to bed. Dad wanted to talk to you right away. I kept saying we needed more time to figure out how to handle it. We were stuck between loving you and being afraid of what loving you might cost us. Then you told us about River, and we panicked. All our fear came pouring out in the worst possible way. We said things we didn't mean. We did things we'd practiced not doing 1,000 times in our heads. But here's the secret we've never told anyone. Asking you to leave was never meant to be permanent. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the letter. We thought if we were firm enough, if we made it clear how serious we were, you'd break up with her and come back to us. We thought it was a phase. We thought we were saving you from making a mistake that would ruin your life. We thought we were being good parents. We were idiots. 3 days after you left, your father couldn't sleep. He kept walking to your room and staring at your empty bed. On the 4th day, he came to me crying. "We have to call her back," he said. "I don't care what people think. I want my daughter home." But when we called, your phone was disconnected. We drove to Kaya's apartment, but you'd already moved out. For weeks, we searched for you. Dad drove by every apartment complex in town. I called every business, asking if they'd hired someone named Zara. We were going crazy without you. Then Dad lost his job. Not because of you, but because the company was downsizing. But suddenly, we had bigger problems than our pride. We were drowning financially, and the one person whose name was on our deed, the one person who could help us save our home, was gone. We put your name on the deed 5 years ago because we wanted you to inherit the house someday. We never imagined we'd need your help to keep it. When you came back to help us save the house, when you fought for us even after we'd hurt you so badly, that's when we knew we'd raised someone better than we deserved. You taught us what real love looks like, not the kind that comes with conditions, not the kind that breaks when things get hard, the kind that shows up when it's needed, even when it's not easy. We were supposed to be the parents teaching you about life. Instead, you became the teacher, showing us how to be better people. River was never the problem. Our fear was the problem. Our pride was the problem. Our small idea of what love should look like was the problem. By the time we figured that out, we didn't know how to tell you. How do you explain to your daughter that you threw her away because you were scared? How do you admit that you failed? The most important test of parenthood. So we decided to show you instead of telling you. To love River because you love her. To make her family because she's your family. To prove every day that we learned our lesson. But you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that every single day since you left, we regretted what we did, that we would take it back in a heartbeat if we could. That losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to us, and getting you back was our second chance at being the parents you deserved all along. We love you, Habibti. We've always loved you. We just had to learn how to love you better. Loy. Our love, Mom and Dad, P.S. Your father wanted me to add that he's proud of the woman you've become, that he brags about you to anyone who will listen, that he tells people his daughter saved their house and their hearts and taught them what real strength looks like. I sat in that dusty attic for an hour, crying and rereading the letter. Everything I thought I knew about my story was different. Now, they hadn't kicked me out because they stopped loving me. They'd kicked me out because they loved me wrong, and they were too scared and proud to love me right. But the worst part? They'd been looking for me. While I was writing letters I never sent, they were driving around town trying to find me. While I was convinced they'd moved on without me, they were falling apart without me. We'd all been so busy being hurt that we'd forgotten how to be honest. I climbed down from the attic and found Mom in the kitchen, making dinner like she did, every night, like we were a normal family who'd never been broken. "Mom," I said, holding up the letter. She turned around and saw what was in my hands. Her face went white. "Oh," she said quietly. "You found it." "You knew about River before. I told you." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "We knew. We were cowards about it. You looked for me after I left. Every day for months. Your father nearly made himself sick driving around looking for you. Why didn't you tell me this before?" She sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Because we were ashamed. Because admitting we knew makes what we did even worse. Because we thought if you knew how badly we'd failed you, you might leave again." Dad came in from the garage, took one look at us, and knew. "She found the letter," Mom said. He sat down next to her, suddenly looking older. "We should have given it to you sooner." "Why now?" I asked. "Why did you write it now?" "Because you're married now," Dad said. "Because you're starting your own family. Because someday you might be a parent and you'll understand how easy it is to make terrible mistakes when you're scared for your child." "Because we wanted you to know the whole truth," Mom added. "Good and bad. We wanted you to know that even when we were wrong, we were never not loving you." I looked at these two people who'd raised me, who'd broken my heart and then helped me heal it, who'd learned to love bigger because I'd forced them to. "I forgive you," I said. "I forgave you a long time ago. But this helps me understand. It makes the hurt make sense." "We don't deserve your forgiveness," Dad said. "Lucky for you," I said. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing to love someone even when they mess up, even when they mess up badly." Mom started crying then, the kind of crying that comes from deep relief, like she'd been holding her breath for 3 years and could finally let it out. "I need to call River," I said. "She should know this too." "Will you tell her we're sorry?" Mom asked, "for all the time we wasted being afraid of her?" "You can tell her yourself at dinner tonight," I said, "like you have been for the past year." That evening, with River curled up next to me on the couch, I read her the letter. She listened, without saying anything, just holding my hand tighter when I got to the hard parts. "How do you feel?" she asked when I finished. "Different," I said. "Like the story I've been telling myself wasn't the whole story." "Are you angry?" I thought about it. "No, I'm sad for all of us, for all the time we lost being afraid of each other. But I'm not angry." "Why not?" "Because look where we ended up," I said, gesturing around the living room where my parents were, arguing about what movie to watch like they'd been doing my whole life. "Look at what we built from all that brokenness." "You really think everything happens for a reason?" River asked. "No," I said. "I think we make reasons out of the things that happen. I think we get to choose what our pain becomes. It can become bitterness, or it can become wisdom. It can make us smaller, or it can make us bigger. What did yours become?" I looked at my parents who'd learned to love without conditions, at my wife who'd loved me through everything, at the life we'd built from the ashes of the worst day of my life. "Home," I said. It became home. Later that night, I took out all those letters I'd written but never sent. Pages and pages of words I'd been too scared to say. I carried them outside to Dad's fire pit and lit them one by one, watching 3 years of hurt and longing turn to smoke and drift away. River found me there, feeding the last letter to the flames. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About the letters? No. They did their job. They held my feelings until I was strong enough to speak them out loud. About any of it? I thought about the girl who'd driven away with everything she owned in garbage bags, about the long, hard months of learning to stand on her own, about the fear and pride and stubbornness that had kept us all apart for so long. No regrets, I said. Just gratitude. For what? For getting thrown out of paradise, I said. Because it turns out paradise is something you have to build for yourself, and the one you build is always better than the one you're given. The fire crackled and sparked, turning our past into light and warmth. Tomorrow we'd wake up in the house where it all began, but we'd be different people than the ones who'd broken here. We'd be people who'd learned that love isn't fragile, that families aren't fragile, that the things worth having are the things strong enough to survive being broken and becoming whole again. The mortgage company had called about a foreclosure, but what they'd really done was call us home to each other. And that, I realized, was the best plot twist of all. That's Zara's incredible story of love, loss, and finding her way back home. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who love us the most. They just don't know how to show it yet. I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Drop a comment and tell me your city or country. Your story matters too. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When you subscribe, you're helping us spread more stories of hope and kindness to people who need them most. And speaking of stories that will move you, click on the video appearing on your screen right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Remember, no matter how broken things seem, love always finds a way home. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.